Hey everybody, it's Atheist for the Cause here with another special report for you. And this one is big because President Donald Trump has decided to leave and withdraw from the Paris Accord, or also known as the Paris Agreement. This Paris Agreement is basically a promise by countries to reduce carbon emissions and to try to curb global warming, and almost every country in the world had signed on. And President Trump decided it was best for the U.S. to leave. He had previously been trying to renegotiate, but that renegotiation must have failed, so he withdrew. Which is, before I even get into this, to me that's pretty interesting. Because it's you have to wonder, were the Europeans trying to call Trump's bluff and be like, if you want to leave, you're gonna have to leave, and we're gonna refuse to negotiate? Was there just not enough time to negotiate a better or a different deal, or were they trying to play hardball, and are they going to continue to play hardball with some sort of renegotiation? But anyways, let's get into this. I'm gonna start by playing this video. It's less than a minute long. It says, Donald Trump announces the United States withdrawal from the Paris Climate Accord to protect America and its citizens and seek a new deal on terms that are fair to the United States. But if we can't, that's fine. This is so Trump. Oh, another thing is this: Trump ran on this. So whether you like Trump or you hate Trump, whether you agree with Trump or you disagree with Trump, here's the thing: at least we have a president following through on what he campaigned on. That is all he has done this entire time. And whether love him or hate him, doesn't he deserve at least a little credit for coming through on what he was voted in to do, even if you despise his policies? I mean, there are certain things I didn't like about Trump. I love Trump as a candidate, but no candidate is perfect. And there are certain things that I wish he didn't follow through on, but he did. And in a sense, I'm happy that he followed through on the things I didn't like, because it tells me he's actually telling us the truth, much more than he gets credit for. So, people always say, Trump's a liar. I say, show me where he's lied. Sure, you can nitpick some comments and say that he changed a position here or there, if you're getting really nitpicky. But on the big things, and taking his words at really the spirit of what he usually means, there isn't a whole lot of waffling there. He follows through on what he has campaigned on, and that's just how it is. So this is another example of that, and let's listen to this video.
In order to fulfill my solemn duty to protect America and its citizens, the United States will withdraw from the Paris Climate Accord, but begin negotiations to re-enter either the Paris...
Now listen to this, because this is exactly what Trump does. There aren't really many treaties that Trump likes. He wants to basically redo all of them. He wants to be the grandmaster of all these treaties. Negotiation, he feels, is his thing. That's, as president, that's what he wants to concentrate on. And, that's how he wants to make his impact. Each president's different. Some presidents are more on foreign policy. Some presidents are more on social issues. Trump's thing is totally 100% economic. So it's funny because as much as Trump talks about strength, it's the economic aspect that defines him. So let's continue to listen to how basically getting out of the Paris Agreement isn't just getting out. There's caveats to this that a lot of the media might not tell you.
Paris Accord, or in really entirely new transaction.
So he said he's willing to renegotiate the Paris Accord to get back in, or come up with something entirely new that he could negotiate with other countries, and that would improve the environment. So, if this is going to be spun as anti-environment or whatever, according to Trump's words, he's not completely against some sort of environmental treaty. He just wants to renegotiate it. And the thing is about this too, real quickly, is that with when it comes to green energy, environmental standards and all of that, I feel like we've reached a point on the debate whether you're either considered completely skeptical of global warming and a complete conspiracy theorist on whether carbon emissions impacts global warming and whether humans impact global warming, or you're on the complete other end and there's anything anybody does that hurts the environment is a huge problem. There seems to be no middle ground. And why are the environmentalists so extreme? Why can't we protect our jobs at the same time that we try to improve the environment? Why can't we protect our economy at the same time we improve the environment? That's what true innovation is. True innovation is not necessarily hurting your economy to move forward. Let's find ways to improve our economy to move forward. Let's, improve green energy and other types of energy to the point where it's more profitable, and let the markets dictate that we switch over. And then from there, we'll be improving our economy while improving the environment. So, and there could be a happy medium in between, where maybe you slow growth a little bit to, greatly improve the environment. But what environmentalists have been doing is they're extremely unhappy if you're even unwilling to destroy your economy for the smallest benefit to the environment. So and we can't just assume that these agreements will actually improve the environment either, because that could be false.
On terms that are fair to the United States, its businesses, its workers, its people, its taxpayers. So we're getting out, but we will start to negotiate, and we will see if we can make a deal that's fair. And if we can, that's great. And if we can't, that's fine.
I love that. If we can, that's great. And if we can't, that's fine too. Trump has walked away from the table, and I love it in the sense that this is a bold move. The easy move is to stay in, even if it hurts the U.S. The easy move is to stay in. That's what everybody's expecting the U.S. to do. And, outside of until Trump got elected. So, I mean, the fact that he walked away and, he's saying to them basically, renegotiate with me or we're gonna stay out of it. He's really forcing their hands, and it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. Because we do have a bit of an EU versus US thing going here. So but there are other parties. There's Asia is heavily involved in this too. So this is just very, very interesting stuff. And this is risky by Trump. I mean, there's no guarantee that this doesn't backfire or this doesn't really hurt the environment. But in the long run, getting out of the Paris Accord could actually improve the environment, and it will. I'll get to that in a little bit, but because I have this huge article here, I'm about to go over, and you'll see some of the points. But that's the big news for the day. So if you don't want to hear the details, you can check out now, like and subscribe. I'd really appreciate it, and share if you can. But I think you should stay for the rest of this, because this article is amazing. The Daily Mail, I'm just coming to love the Daily Mail. I think it's a little on the conservative side, but it's like pretty close to the center, it seems, and they're just really reasonable. And they'll have this big article that's really informative, and they always have these bullet points so that you can see if you want to read further or not. So it's really check out the Daily Mail. They've got a lot of good stuff. But anyways, says, I represent the people of Pittsburgh, not Paris. Trump pulls U.S. out of climate accord, saying it is a foreign attempt to seize American jobs and American wealth, and is immediately attacked by Obama. Obama comes out of the woodwork finally. So it says, let's just skip these bullet points. Donald Trump pulled the United States out of the Paris Accord on climate change on Wednesday afternoon, deriding it as bad for American jobs and bad for the environment. And that's an interesting point. He's claiming it's bad for the environment. Is it or isn't it? Sometimes when something claims to be something, it isn't that at all. Or even if it tries to be whatever it claims to be, and it attempts to be that, like the Paris Agreement attempts to improve the environment in good faith, but that doesn't mean it accomplishes that. And you really have to, challenge yourself on this. If you would just assume the Paris Accord would actually improve the environment, challenge yourself, think about it. Why would it? Because Trump's challenging that concept, that set narrative. And so now you have two competing ideas, and you've got to decide which one you like. So anyways, let's continue. He dared opprobrium from foreign leaders, environmentalists, scientists, and celebrities to say he was putting the jobs of American workers first. We don't want other leaders in other countries laughing at us anymore. And they won't be. They won't be, Trump declared. I was elected to represent the citizens of Pittsburgh, not Paris. I love that, by the way. This is something that I really think the European Union leaders don't understand, is that your country should come first. The people you govern are not the people of Europe. They're the people of your country. And failing your country and hurting your country to benefit the European Union as a whole is a disgrace. And Trump is not going to benefit Europe or the world at the expense of the American people. So if you want to do something with Trump, you have to look at it through the lens of how will this help Americans. And, if improving the environment will help Americans most, Trump will be open to it. He's never been anti-environment. Although he's not the most pro-environmentally friendly candidate, he's not necessarily, out to hurt the environment, and he's not against helping the environment in certain ways if it can be done in a way that helps the economy. So I'd just like you to consider that, allowing coal to exist doesn't mean that we're banning green energy. And competition isn't always bad. So consider things like that. So before he even sat down, his predecessor, Barack Obama, launched an all-out assault, saying Trump joins a small handful of nations that reject the future. That's just bullshit, Obama. Reject the future? What does that even mean? Reject the future? What future? Are you talking about, like, now the Earth is destined to fail? Is that really your message? Or are you saying that we're not going to lead environmentally? If that's what you mean, say that. Don't say we reject the future. That's just dumb. Elon Musk, the Tesla billionaire, said he was quitting advising the White House, tweeting, "Leaving Paris is not good for America or the world." Elon Musk, first of all, he has a lot of interest in green energy and stuff. And people forget that, these green energy companies there's a lot of money to be made there too. There's a lot of money to be made in subsidies and things like that. Of course, Elon Musk is going to want to be in all these environmentally friendly treaties and stuff, because those are going to benefit his companies most likely. But the other thing is, I think this is quite cowardly by Elon Musk. For someone who's supposedly a visionary, and I think he actually is a visionary, it's a little bit closed-minded and lacks vision to the future to not realize that there's more than one way to improve the environment. We don't have to be in a Paris Accord to improve the environment. There's no reason we can't improve the environment more than we would have under the Paris Accord. Now, I'm not saying that will necessarily happen, but to just say, okay, we're out, so I'm not going to talk to you anymore or advise you anymore, that's just cowardly. Why don't you get in and try to help Trump negotiate these, advise him on how to negotiate back into it in a way that will help our economy and improve the environment even more? Do you lack the vision for that? Do you lack the innovation for that? I mean, you've been a visionary and an innovator in the past, but it seems that your emotions are getting the best of you, Elon Musk. That's disappointing. And I want people like Elon Musk to be around Trump, because I am not I am not a global warming skeptic. I do think that humans have, impacted the environment, and I do think it's a problem of the future, although I don't think it's as dire as some people, where they say, the world's going to be destroyed in 20 years. No, I don't think that. So it says President Donald Trump took the United States out of the Paris Climate Accord on Thursday in a dramatic Rose Garden statement, which lashed out at foreign leaders. America First, Trump was unrepentant in saying that he was standing up for U.S. interests. America First, we don't want other leaders and other countries laughing at us anymore, and they won't be. They won't be, the president said in the Rose Garden. I love that picture. Little bit. That's what it looks like he's saying there. They have a longer video of it if you want to see that. Where's Jared? The president's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, and his daughter Ivanka, both said to have wanted to stay in the Paris Treaty, were absent as they marked a Jewish holiday. So maybe they were absent because they were upset about this. Who knows? Or maybe it was just the Jewish holiday that made them absent. Elon Musk, am departing presidential councils. Climate change is real. Leaving Paris is not good for America or the world. Leaving Paris, the Paris Accord, does not mean that you have to necessarily think that climate change is not real. And from what I've gathered, what Trump believes, I'm not 100% where he is on this. I think he thinks the globe is actually warming, although, I think he might think that humans have some impact, but that it's not as strong as people make it out to be, basically. And I definitely know that he believes that any environmental changes, have to come on the global level. He feels all countries have to work at it because, say the U.S. cuts our global emissions, and then say we ban coal completely, but then if coal gets exported to China, and China burns that coal with even less environmental standards than we would have had, then they're producing even more emissions than we would have. So he thinks that all countries pretty much have to come together. So he's not really against inherently something like the Paris Accord, to be honest. It says Trump complained in the White House's Rose Garden that major polluters like China are allowed to increase their emissions under the agreement. And by the way, this is going to tell us a lot of details about the Paris Accord and some loopholes in it, basically, that are actually quite problematic. And if you listen to this with an open ear, you may change your mind on whether we should be in the Paris Accord or not. It says China are allowed to increase their emissions under the agreement in a way that the U.S. cannot. India is hinging its participation on billions of dollars of foreign aid. The deal is a massive redistribution of United States wealth to other countries, he said. I don't know the agreement well enough to know if this is true or not, but I do know this is how the European Union operates. So I don't doubt it at all. The European Union operates by basically the rich countries taking workers from the poor countries, and then there is redistribution of wealth to the poor countries from the rich countries. So a country like Germany can both increase its GDP, and yet they subsidize the poor countries, and it all comes at the cost of the German workers, basically. So that's exactly how the European Union works, so I wouldn't be surprised if that's how this treaty works, because Obama and Clinton were also pro-European Union. So the Paris Accord is very unfair at the highest level to the United States. This agreement is less about the climate and more about other countries gaining a financial advantage over the United States, Trump said. And I'd really like you to think about this just at face value. Don't question whether it's actually true or not. That's really, it starts getting into really muddied waters, and it's really, takes a lot of research to look at the agreement itself. These agreements are thousands and thousands of pages. You're not going to read the whole thing. And so I think hundreds of thousands of pages, to be honest. So just listen to the argument at face value. See if you agree, with the logic first, where if what he's saying is true, would you agree with the rest? And then if you can say, well, I can see where he's coming from, then you can go back, reread it with a more skeptical eye. I think that's the best way to go about these things. And actually, challenge each thing and then do all your research as you go through the second time. So it says, Trump said he would also end the United States participation in the United Nations Green Climate Fund. In a slap at European leaders who'd lobbied him last week, including France's Emmanuel Macron, Trump said the Paris exit is a quote-unquote reassertion of America's sovereignty. Interesting that he would use those words because he knows that's what Brexit was about. That's what his election was largely about, to be honest. And, I think he's hoping to get some, for a quote like this to get him some support. Foreign leaders in Europe, Asia, and across the world should not have more to say with respect to the U.S. economy than our own citizens and their elected representatives, Trump proclaimed. Trump told off naysayers in a lengthy explanation of his decision and the effect he expects to have on the U.S. economy. and that's really the effect he expects to have on the U.S. economy. It's really interesting what he brings up. Whether it's true or not, I'm not 100%, but if it is, I can see why he would get out. The Paris Agreement handicaps the U.S. economy in order to win praise from the very foreign capitals and global activists that have long sought to gain wealth at our country's expense. They don't put America first. I do, and I always will, he said. I actually believe Trump when he says that. I actually do see him as quite patriotic, a guy who actually really does love the U.S., and I think he's trying to build a U.S. for his children for the future, and his grandchildren. I see him as far less selfish as a lot of other people see him. He outlined what he said the Accord would do the American economy. 2.7 million lost jobs by 2025. 2.7 million lost jobs. $3 trillion lost in GDP by 2050. And an average household income loss of $7,000. Now, do you want to be in a Paris Agreement if these points are true? Because that might change your mind. We're not we're not a single issue country. We have many issues to deal with, and the damage this would do to a lot of average people, especially in the middle class, would be extraordinary if true. And the poor as well, that's a lot of lost jobs. 2.7 million lost jobs. That's just such a huge number. Trump said he would be willing to get back. Oh, okay. Actually, I want to take a break from this for a second because I want to just show you what 2.7 million lost jobs looks like. And I want to show you just how well Trump has been doing in creating jobs. Remember, he made the promise, and I've covered this in other videos. Trump has made the promise to create 25 million jobs over 10 years. And let's look at if he's on pace or not. It says, so this is in January. Trump created 227,000 jobs with an expectations of 180,000 jobs. So, 47,000 jobs extra. In February, he created 298,000 for the month, and that was way higher than the 190,000 expected jobs. So he was 108,000 jobs higher than the expected on the month. Now, March was his sole slip up, and it says the jobs grew by 98,000 in March, and the expected was 180,000, so he lost about, what is that, 72,000? Is that? No, 82,000, I think that is, that he lost. And then you go to April, and as you can see here, jobs grew by 211,000, and the economist surveyed the growth to be at 185,000. So that's another like 30,000-ish jobs that he created more than expected. Then we get to May, and increase the jobs by 253,000, another huge number. And the expected was only 185,000, so somewhere around like 70,000 jobs higher than expected. And I actually have a bunch of calculators here that I calculated some stuff out to show you. So far, Trump has created 167,000 jobs higher than what has been expected over just 5 months. If you calculate that out to, over 10 years, that's 4,008,000 jobs higher than the expected if he continues this every month for 10 years. Now, of course, that would be 400,800 jobs per year, over the course of this year if he continues as he's going. And then if you look, he's created 1,087,000 jobs for the year. That's what the full number will be. And over 10, this is per month, or no, I'm sorry, per the 5 months he's created. The jobs so far that he's created is 1,087,000. Sorry, I have too many calculators here. I forgot what it was. And so if you divide that by 5 and then calculate it out times 12 for the year and then times 10 for the 10 years, 10-year promise where he needs to get to 25 million jobs, he's he'll be at 26,088,000 jobs created over 10 years if he continues at this pace. And so when we go back and we look and see that 2.7 million jobs lost by 2025, and that's, within 8 years, well, that puts him under his goal. So he doesn't want that. And also, that takes out nearly 75% of his job growth above what it was. So above what was expected. So, 2.7 million lost jobs when he's on pace to create 4 million more than expected. That's a huge number of jobs. That really puts it in context, I think. So that amount is about double what he's created in the 5 months so far. And he's created a lot. So just think about that for a little perspective. Trump said he would be willing to get back in, but only if he is allowed to renegotiate the terms of the United States participation. So he's not even against the agreement. And if they want the U.S. in that badly, if it's so important that we're in, and this is going to do such a great thing for the environment, and, these other countries claim that this is necessary and all of that, well, then let us back in and cave to what we want. It's as simple as that. The ball's in your court now. But if this is all about other things, if this is about basically taking our jobs, our money, and redistributing it to other countries, well, then maybe you'll complain a little bit more and not let us back in, will you? Because you won't want to give up those benefits. So it says, among Trump's reasons for leaving the accord was the massive legal liability that administration lawyers had warned him about. The Republican president also said he could not support the agreement in good conscience from an environmental standpoint either, as someone who cares deeply about the environment, which I do, because it is non-binding. And that's key. Should we put it in this perspective? Should we sacrifice 2.7 million jobs by 2025, so basically within like 8 years, $3 trillion in our GDP by 2050, and an average income loss of $7,000 for a non-binding agreement? Does that make sense? Because that doesn't make sense to me. Even though I want to improve the environment, if I'm going to be giving up this much in my country, I want something binding. It imposes no meaningful obligations on the world's leading polluters, Trump said, naming India and China as countries which would do what they like. Okay, so, I think what Trump is implying here is that leaders are being naive. They're assuming that just because they have a signature that to a non-binding agreement, that these other countries will act in good faith to fulfill that agreement, when really they can just abuse the countries who are acting in good faith, and destroy them economically. And they can destroy the environment while they do it. So here's another thing. The worst agreement is not no agreement. And you kind of heard that soundbite in the UK elections, in the UK campaigning, I should say. The worst agreement that you can have is a bad agreement, one which people think will improve the environment and doesn't, because you think that you've done something to solve it. You think you've taken a step in the right direction, and you may have taken a step in the wrong direction. That is the most dangerous type of agreement. So let's be sure, that this Paris Agreement would actually improve the environment. Let's make it binding. Or let's get something else that is binding to improve the environment. I mean, do you really trust all these countries to fulfill their duty under the agreement? It imposes no meaningful obligations on the world's leading polluters, Trump said, naming India and China as countries which would do what they like. The other thing about India, it's an emerging market. Developing countries, we're in the U.S., we're developed, but India is developing. So a developing country actually pollutes the most. A developed country can then scale back their pollution as they move from like manufacturing and jobs that pollute a lot. They'll move away from that to like technology and things like that pollute far less. Sitting in the front row for Trump's outdoor announcement, Chief Strategist Steve Bannon, EPA Administrator Scott Pruitt, and Vice President Mike Pence, all of whom were part of the push to leave the agreement. Trump ended months of speculation in an afternoon Rose Garden event promoted with all the anticipation of a major press conference. He sided with the conservative groups over world leaders and his daughter Ivanka, declaring that the accord passes a dire threat to the American economy and jobs market. That's important to note. Trump is not living in an echo chamber. Apparently, Ivanka and Jared Kushner and some others wanted Trump to stay in. Some conservative groups, obviously the world leaders in the European Union also wanted him to stay in. But then there are conservative groups and probably guys like Steve Bannon that wanted him out. And, he had a diversity of ideas. He had people like Elon Musk to listen to. as well, and he's willing to be a leader and make decisions that are possibly unpopular for what he believes is the betterment of the country. And that's a respectable position, because that's what a leader is. A leader is willing to do what is unpopular for what is, what they believe to be best. And we didn't elect Jared Kushner. We didn't elect Ivanka Trump. We didn't elect Elon Musk. We elected Donald Trump to make these decisions. Now President Trump. She was not there to see more conservative advisors applaud loudly as he said the United States was out of the treaty. Neither was her husband, Jared Kushner, one of his closest aides, who had been said to have lobbied to stay in. The White House tipped its hand just an hour before the president spoke, when it distributed a set of talking points to allied organizations that proclaimed, "The Paris Accord is a bad deal for Americans, and the president's action today is keeping his campaign promise to put American workers first." The document says the U.S. is exiting the International Climate Accord because it is in the best interest of the U.S. economy. And if you take that at face value, if we're protecting the economy to the extent that 2.7 million jobs within 8 years, it was $3 trillion by 2050 or by 2050 to the GDP, and $7,000 income loss to the average household. Is getting out of this non-binding agreement worth that? Worth preventing that economic hit? I think this is a much more nuanced debate than the environmentalists want to make you believe in the mainstream media. They want to make it seem like there's really only one side to this, and we have to be in or the world's going to crumble. And I don't agree with that assessment. There are other ways to, get it. There are other treaties we can create. We can negotiate back in potentially. So the Paris Accord talkers, I think distributed. This is official White House document setting out why Trump is pulling the U.S. out of the Paris Accord. Top line, the Paris Accord is a bad deal for Americans, and the president's action today is keeping his campaign promise to put American workers first. The accord was negotiated poorly by the Obama administration and signed out of desperation. It front loads costs on the American people to the detriment of our economy and job growth while extracting meaningless commitments around the world's top global emitters, like China. The U.S. is already leading the world in energy production and doesn't need a bad deal that will harm American workers. Keep in mind, Obama was at the end of his term when this was signed. So when you say out of desperation, to a large extent that is, Obama wanted to get this signed before he left office. Because if he didn't get it signed before he left office, then, he wouldn't have the power to, have his impact on it. And that is, a president's weakest moments is when he's about to leave office. So these leaders could have easily recognized that and taken advantage of them. Undermines U.S. competitiveness and jobs. It could have been made hastily. According to a study by NERA Consulting, meeting the Obama administration's requirements in the Paris Accord would cost the U.S. economy nearly $3 trillion over the next several decades. By 2040, our economy would lose 6.5 million industrial sector jobs, including 3.1 million manufacturing sector jobs. And keep in mind, especially the manufacturing jobs, those are hard to create and get back, and those are this is an area Trump promised people, the Rust Belt, That's where he won his election, and he promised the people of Wisconsin, the people of Michigan, the people of Pennsylvania. Michigan went slightly against Trump, if I remember right, but Wisconsin went for Trump, and Pennsylvania went for Trump. Now I'm blanking. Maybe Michigan did go for Trump. Can't even remember right now. But much of the Midwest, where, Ohio, where these manufacturing jobs would be, Iowa, they all went for Trump, and he promised them, I'm gonna grow your manufacturing, and he's done that to this point. If you wanna, I'm gonna post this. But if you look at a lot of these jobs, the manufacturing jobs are growing. Of course, manufacturing is never going to be what it once was, but if we can slow down the rate at which we lose jobs, that can help a lot of people and improve a lot of lives. It would effectively decapitate our coal industry, which now supplies about 1/3 of our electrical power. That's an interesting point, because the mainstream media would have you believe that we don't use coal anymore. But apparently, 1/3 of our electric power is through coal. The deal was negotiated badly and extracts meaningless commitments from the world's top polluters. The Obama negotiated accord imposes unrealistic targets on the U.S. for reducing our carbon emissions, while giving countries like China a free pass for years to come. What says that? I'm going to bring this point up in a little bit. Under the accord, China will actually increase emissions until 2030. The U.S. is already a clean energy and oil and gas energy leader. We can reduce our emissions and continue to produce American energy without the Paris Accord. Of course we can. America has already reduced its carbon dioxide emissions dramatically. Since 2006, carbon emissions have declined by 12% and are expected to continue to decline, or CO2 emissions, according to the, which is carbon dioxide. According to the Energy Information Administration, the U.S. is the leader in oil and gas production. The agreement funds a UN climate slush fund underwritten by American taxpayers. Do you really believe that the UN climate slush fund will spend that money wisely and not just pay off the big wigs and then waste a bunch of money? Because I would rather have, American business innovation rather than UN climate slush funds. I don't know about you. And there's a lot of money being poured into that. President Obama already committed $3 billion to the Green Climate Fund, which is about 30% of the initial funding, without authorization from Congress. So there you have a question. Why should the U.S. pay for 30% right off the bat? And then you have, with $20 trillion in debt, the U.S. taxpayers should not be paying to subsidize other countries' energy needs. The deal also accomplishes little for the climate. According to researchers at MIT, if all member nations met their obligations, the impact on the climate would be negligible. The impacts have been estimated to be likely to reduce global temperature rise by less than 0.2 degrees Celsius in 2100. So take that for what it is. But then there's this little bit about Obama's fury at Trump move. Obama issued a statement while the president was still speaking, saying, "A year and a half ago, the world came together in Paris around the first ever global agreement to set the world on a low carbon course and protect the world we leave to our children." But did it actually accomplish that, President Obama? It was steady, or former President Obama. It was steady, principled American leadership on the world stage that made that achievement possible. It was okay. I don't think we can call merely getting signatures an achievement. It's only an achievement if the countries actually follow through. It was bold American ambition that encouraged dozens of other nations to set their sights higher as well. Well, did their sights suddenly go down now that the U.S. is out? Speaking out, Obama made a series of foreign trips, all of them on private jets, and used Trump's Rose Garden announcement to explicitly attack the new president. And what made the leadership and ambition possible was America's private innovation and public investment in growing industries like wind and solar industries that created some of the fastest new streams of good-paying jobs in recent years and contributed to the longest streak of job creation in our history. Why can't we still have that? We absolutely can still have that. Getting out of the Paris Agreement doesn't mean we have to suddenly stop growing industries like wind and solar. Simply put, the private sector already chose a low-carbon future. Then why do we need the Paris Agreement? If the private sector is already choosing it, why do we need this non-binding agreement? And for the nations that committed themselves to the future, the Paris Agreement opened the floodgates for businesses, scientists, and engineers to unleash high-tech, low-carbon investment and innovation on an unprecedented scale. They can still do that. The nations that remain in the Paris Agreement will be the nations that reap the benefits and jobs and industries created. I believe the United States of America should be at the front of that pack. You're assuming that just because we're out, we're not going to be in these clean energy industries, and that's just not the truth. We are still going to be in these industries. But even in the absence of American leadership, even as the administration joins a small handful of nations that reject the future, I hate that term, I'm confident that our states, cities, and businesses will step up and do even more to lead the way and help protect for future generations the one planet we've got. For now, come on, be a visionary. We're going to have more planets in the future. That doesn't mean, by the way, we shouldn't protect this one. But we are not going to stay on Earth forever. We are going to go to the other planets and moons and other space objects. Heck, we may be even colonizing asteroids someday. A successful businessman, before he was elected, Trump has already taken steps to end the job-killing regulations his predecessor enacted in order to bring the U.S. in line with the Environmental Pact. In a May 26, 2016 speech to a gas and oil-friendly crowd in Bismarck, North Dakota, he declared flatly, "We're going to cancel the Paris Climate Agreement." See? Told you. That says it. Trump had already promised this is what he campaigned on, that he'd get us out, and he did. Put it in the box as another promise kept for Mr. President Donald J. Trump. All the man does is keep promises. Trump also said that if he were elected, he would stop making payments to the UN programs that fight global warming. And guess what? Promise kept. The talking points the White House gave to conservative organizations on Thursday said the accord was negotiated poorly by Obama administration and signed out of desperation. And front loads costs on the American people to the detriment of our economy and job growth while extracting meaningless commitments from the world's top global emitters like China. The U.S. is already leading the world in energy production and doesn't need a bad deal with the American workers. So it's just going over. Let's skip ahead a little bit, and it's just going over a lot of what we already said. So it says prime ministers, presidents, and businesses take on Trump. Countries which have decided to stay in Paris were swift to speak out about the impending move to pull out of the climate accord, including the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres said, "Climate change is undeniable. Climate change is unstoppable." Okay, but we're not necessarily saying that climate change isn't happening just because we're getting out. Climate solutions provide opportunities that are unmatchable. Finland, okay, but again, we're not sacrificing those opportunities necessarily. This is a non-binding agreement that really is just a promise to lower carbon emissions. Finnish Prime Minister Juha Sipilä, I have no clue how to say that, said climate change won't be reversed by closing your eyes and called the expected withdrawal a big setback. I wish they'd go a little farther. How do they think this is a big setback? China will reiterate support for Paris Agreement this week during visit by Prime Minister Li Keqiang to Europe, European Union official told Reuters. By the way, I'd say to this Finnish leader, Prime Minister, why don't you wait to see how we negotiate back in or negotiate something else and see, a year or 2 years from now, what was the result of leaving? And was it as damaging as you expected that we left? Or did we get back in or provide a reasonable alternative? Do our emissions go up? Do our emissions stay where they were going? Or do they go down even further? I mean, let's give it a little time and see what happens before we declare, the bottom is fell. European Union President of the European Parliament Antonio Tajani said, "Climate change is not a fairy tale. It is a tough reality which affects people's daily lives." See, they're not saying anything. It's all bullshit, like vague stuff. And give me something with substance. Like, you may even be right in your argument, but give me the substance on why you are right. Because from what this article is giving me, Trump's the one giving, the more specific details. Vatican Bishop Marcelo Sanchez Herando, head of the Pontifical Academy of Sciences, said, "If he really does pull out, it would be a huge slap in the face for us. It will be a disaster for everyone." Why? How so? Give me some detailed substance. There's a tweet. "Dear President Trump, as some of the largest companies based or operating in the U.S., we strongly urge you to keep the United States in the Paris Agreement on climate change. Climate change presents both businesses risks and business opportunities. Continued U.S. participation in the agreement benefits U.S. businesses and the U.S. economy in many ways. Strengthening competitiveness by requiring action by developed and developing countries alike, the agreement ensures a more balanced global effort, reducing the risk of competitive imbalances for U.S. companies." But as we already pointed out, this is non-binding. There is no guarantee that the Paris Accord does this. And in fact, one of the major ways that we could, that our businesses could get ahead is by ignoring the agreement, and then hopefully the other countries would actually go through with the agreement and we would get a major competitive balance over them. But that would be kind of a shady way to do it. Instead, we're just getting out. Creating jobs, markets, and growth. By expanding markets for innovative, clean technologies, the agreement generates jobs and economic growth. U.S. companies are well positioned to lead in these markets. Withdrawing from the agreement will limit our access to them and could expose us to retaliatory measures. I mean, retaliatory measures could happen, but only if we refuse to get back in or refuse to create an alternative if we actually are are emitting like crazy. But if our emissions don't go up, they really won't have a leg to stand on in terms of retaliatory measures. So, and like I said, like we've said over and over, it's a non-binding agreement. Reducing business risk. By strengthening global action over time, the agreement will reduce future climate impacts, including damage to business facilities and operations, declining agricultural productivity and water supplies, and disruption of global supply chains. There's really nothing in the agreement that I know of that that really covers this. I mean, we can still do all of this stuff. That's the thing. So basically, I guess what this comes down to is there are a lot of assumptions on what would happen if we stayed in that aren't necessarily true. And there are a lot of assumptions of what will happen now that we're out. For instance, thinking we're going to the assumption seems to be that we're going to go drop all of our environmentally free laws and start emitting like crazy. That's not necessarily true. And if we stayed in, there's no guarantee other countries would, or even us, that we would, follow the rules, because it's non-binding. As businesses concerned with well-being of our customers, our investors, our communities, and our suppliers, we are strengthening our climate resilience, and we are investing in innovative technologies that can help achieve clean energy transition. For the transition to succeed, however, governments must lead as well. U.S. businesses best served by a stable and practical framework facilitating an effective and balanced global response. The Paris Agreement provides such a framework. As other countries let's make it binding though. As other countries invest in advanced technologies and move forward with the Paris Agreement, we believe the U.S. can best exercise global leadership and advance U.S. interests by remaining a full partner in this vital global effort. So it says, sincerely, all of these businesses. It doesn't make me feel good that Facebook's on here, because I don't trust Facebook at all. It says, Microsoft, Apple, Facebook, Google, Gap, Mars, and Tiffany & Company joined a group of large businesses in publishing the open letter. Lakely said Thursday that we're for 4 possible outcomes of Trump's deliberations, including a pullout that could spark lawsuits and an end run involving sending the treaty to the U.S. Senate for ratification. The Senate fails to get the 2/3 votes necessary to ratify the treaty, and it's really dead instantly, he said. I think that, with the Republicans controlling the Senate, it probably would fail. Emmanuel Macron, the newly elected French president, said at a weekend summit in Italy he was sure Trump would back the deal after listening to his G7 counterparts. If you wanted Trump to be in, saying this is not what you should have done. Because that's just challenging. The way Trump thinks, that's just challenging Trump to get out. Do you realize how, if Trump was going to stay in, and he does stay in, after you make a comment like that, do you realize how weak that makes Trump look? It makes him look like he's just caving into you. And now if he gets out and renegotiates back in, he looks strong, and he's all about looking strong. Emmanuel Macron, you are a fucking idiot. But you're new, so maybe you'll get better. But maybe Marine Le Pen should have won, because I think she would understand Trump a little bit better. I'm going to go over this, and then we're almost done. So I know this is getting long, but this is about it. What was the Paris Agreement? The Paris Agreement is the first large-scale global agreement to combat what scientists say is climate change, coming together at the United Nations Climate Change Conference in 2015 and adopted on December 12th. On Earth Day of 2016, April 22nd, it was open for signatures, and enough European countries signed on so that the agreement entered into force on November 4th, 2016, 4 days before Donald Trump was elected. Now, doesn't that kind of show this was rushed? Isn't it a little coincidental? A little too coincidental that it's just before Trump takes office? China and the United States had already committed to backing the deal in September of 2016. That's still pretty late, with their greenhouse gas output accounting for nearly 40% of the world's emissions. To go into legal force, countries accounting for 55% of the world's emissions had to sign on. So this should be able to survive without the United States. The deal asks that the countries signing on reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Right now, 147 countries have ratified the agreement to the 197 who attended the convention, so 50 have not. The aim to keep warming below 2 degrees Celsius, 3.6 degrees Fahrenheit, this century. Part of the reason the Paris Agreement was successful was the ratifying countries can decide independently how to reduce their emissions rather than being told how much to cut by. And they can just choose not to listen to it because it's non-fucking binding. Countries instead put forward their best efforts through nationally determined contributions. See, doesn't this just sound like bullshit? Countries instead put forward their best efforts through nationally determined contributions. There's an interesting part to it, though. It says the binding part of the agreement makes countries report on their progress decreasing emissions. So there is a binding part. It's just like a report on the progress. So basically, if you fail to make progress, you're going to be slightly embarrassed as a country. Because it's going to be out on the world stage. But, I mean, that's pretty minor in my opinion. While the actual setting of emission reduction targets is non-binding. So you can see that what I've been saying this whole time, that this is non-binding, wasn't bullshit. The United States said it would try to reduce emissions from its 2005 level by 17% in 2020 and 26 to 28% by 2025. And this is a big reason I read this, because there's a lot of good info in here. But do you remember before where they were talking, one of Trump's talking points was that we try to the goals set are unrealistic? Now, maybe we can do it, maybe we can't. But the point here is, who says that these are the best numbers? To reduce 17% of what we had in 2005 by 2020 and 26 to 28% by 2025. So we want to get from 17% to 26 to 28% by 2025. So in 5 years. That's a big jump, by the way. 10% in 5 years. So who says these numbers are the right numbers? What if we only do it, at half the speed? What if we go up like 10% by 20, cut it by 10% by 2020, and maybe like 20% by 2025? Would that be reasonable? Or say 15% by 2025. Would that be reasonable? And sure, we're not cutting as much, but, would it help a lot? So I think there's a lot of debate to be had here. And while scientists may all agree on, largely all agree that humans are contributing to global warming, the details the scientists do not agree on all the details, and they're not, and it's not even a scientific question on how quickly we should cut, because that's an economic question on top of lots of other things. There's no one specific industry or, job that, that there's no one specific expert, I guess, you can go to. Like, you're gonna need to find someone who's an expert in science and also an expert in the economy. So it's not like you can just go to any economist or any scientist to know this stuff. So anyways, here's the Pope. That's that. I'm going to cut it here. Sorry this got long, but this is a really long article, and I even skipped a lot of it. So I hope you guys enjoyed the information. I try to be all about the content here. Like and subscribe, and I will be putting out more good information soon. Have a good day, guys, and let me know what you think about leaving the Paris Agreement, and what do you think we should do going forward?